Hello. Camera on. Recording.
Ooh, better them than me. Damn, that must have been hauling ass. It's an inviting section of road to do 130, but every now and then that happens. So, where were we? Now that it's not currently raining, see if I can get up to Fontana Dam before the next little cell gets here. It's up over Maryville right now. It's coming right at me. And Fontana has a museum that's covered. So if I can get there before the bottom falls out, I'll do alright. I don't really care about the bike getting wet. I just don't feel like riding through the mountains in the rain. So, basically what we found out was I don't have anywhere near enough LH and FSH to tell my body to make the right amount of testosterone. So I'm suffering all these side effects, basically. And the doctor lady says, we need you to go get an MRI. Alright. And I asked her why, and I already kind of knew, because when the test results came back and I saw the LH and the FSH, I started Googling. And I knew that there was a very good chance there's a tumor on my pituitary gland. What happens is the pituitary gland is what creates those two hormones and a whole bunch of others. And a tumor grows on them, and it's in a little enclosed hole, cavity thing, kind of right behind your sinuses and like below your frontal lobe of your brain. And what happens is the tumor fills up this cavity and starts putting a lot of pressure on the pituitary gland, which then does any number of different things depending on the tumor or whatever. Usually what happens is the pituitary gland just like stops secreting certain hormones because of the pressure. And the biggest downside to this is this cavity is where your I think they call it the optic chiasm. It's not really the optic nerve, but it's the optic nerve for both eyes. It like meets and then runs through this cavity and then back into your brain. And so as the tumor grows, it starts putting pressure on the optic nerve and you go blind. And so they made me go get a field of vision exam, because you lose your peripheral vision first. Basically, you start getting tunnel vision, and nerves don't grow back, so it's permanent, more or less. I'm sure there's a couple of small cases, like a small number of cases where it's not, but for the most part, it's permanent. We don't want that. So okay, so now starts the fun part, right? So I scheduled my MRI, and it took a lot of work to get it scheduled. I'm not going to go into it. But basically, it took a month to get it scheduled correctly, because the people at the hospital where my doctor works will schedule the MRI for you. And so the doctor was writing up the order, and they were taking it and then calling. Well, I didn't want to have the MRI done at that location. I wanted to have it done in what is called an open MRI, because I was told that they are more open, and I am somewhat claustrophobic and large. Well, I scheduled it. I finally got it scheduled somewhere that had an open MRI, and they told me that they could not do that. The image that was requested could not be created using an open MRI, because the open MRI is not accurate enough. Basically, it can't focus well enough to take a picture of the pituitary gland, which is roughly the size of a pea. Okay, it's smaller than your pinky fingernail. So into the regular MRI I go, and they told me that the open MRI actually would have been just as bad, Because they have to do an image of the brain, it means you lay your head in this cage and they put this mask over you. And that mask was closer to the front of my face than the front of the helmet I'm wearing right now. Okay? But there's two problems. One, I can move my head, all right? Now, the helmet follows me, but I'm not restricted in my movement. In the MRI, you are, because of the image and because you don't want it to go out of focus, but also because this fucking mask is like right there. So I freaked the fuck out. And like I laid down and the tech guy put the mask over me and I just went, nah, get it off. And he looked at me and he goes, what? I said, get it the fuck off right the fuck now. And he started to say something. I just reached up, grabbed it and pulled, and he hadn't snapped it into place yet, thank God. And I sat up and I was like, that ain't gonna happen, brother. It just ain't gonna happen. So we talked a few things over, and he's like, look, don't worry about it. You can get sedation, but you have to have a doctor's order for the sedation, so basically you have to make another appointment. And I was like, yeah, sure, okay. And they'll take what you have to prepay for all this if your insurance isn't covering it, which mine wasn't, which is a whole different ball of wax. So I had to go back to Dr. Lady and say, give me a new order for sedation so I could take it back to the imaging center and get sedated. She said, okay, no problem. So she did, and I rescheduled the appointment. And the girl on the phone told me, she said to expect to be there for 2 to 3 hours beyond the length of the scan, and that I would be able to ambulate under my own, like walk and move and all that. She's like, we're not putting you under, we're just gonna make you not give a shit. And I asked her, I said, well, will I be able to drive? And she says, yeah. She's like, it'll take you a couple hours, but you can hang out here until it's worn off and then you drive home. And I said, okay. So I made the appointment for a Wednesday, and then I went to the imaging center on a Tuesday thinking the appointment was paid for Tuesday. So I get there on Tuesday and they can't figure out why I'm there, and so we're talking, we're working things out, and they're like, oh, well, okay, so your appointment's actually tomorrow, but we couldn't have done it today, even if it was for today, because the sedation takes 12 hours to wear off. They will not sedate someone who shows up without a ride home. So I had to call a friend and get her to agree to pick me up after the scan the next day. And I told him, I was like, well, whoever I talked to on the phone said I'd be fine. And they were like, oh, God, no. It's okay. And so the next day, I take an Uber up there and go in, and they give me an IV. They get it started and sit there for like 15 minutes while all that shit sets in. And then they take me in, and I don't really care what's like. I'm just chill. If you've ever seen The Office Space, that's pretty much what I felt like. And I lay down in the thing, and they've got me hooked up to like the heart rate monitors and all that. And the nurse lady told me, if your heart rate spikes, don't worry, we're gonna give you more of the juice. You know, we're gonna make it stronger if we need to. I said, okay. Oh, what are we doing?
Recording stopped. Goodbye.